to Smart from the Start. I'm Daryl Murdoch, your host for this series about education. This episode focuses on questions you've always wanted to know about schools, but perhaps been a bit too afraid to ask. You know, everybody considers themselves a little bit of an armchair expert about schools because it's a common experience that everyone has had. Hence, we think we know what goes on in schools. Today, our panel of experts are going to explore what really happens in schools, and we hope will answer some of your questions. Leanne, welcome.
Thank you, nice to be here.
How many years have you been involved in education and schools?
15, I can't believe it, but 15 so far.
Excellent,
yeah.
Excellent. So you've got a lot of experience. Josh, what about you?
This is my first year teaching, yep.
Okay, so you're going to give a perspective of somebody who's just fresh in the field and finding out just exactly what education and teaching is all about.
Yeah.
Lyndon, many years of experience.
Yeah, a little while ago I clocked up about 30 years, Daryl. Thank you.
Okay, a man of great experience. I'm sure you'll have much to offer. And Clinton, you've just started a principalship in Cairns. What's your degree of experience in the teaching field?
I've been teaching. This is my 8th year teaching this year.
Fantastic. Welcome, panel. You know, we all seem to think that we know something about education. And when we think back on our time in school, perhaps there's things that come to mind. There are teachers that you remember for good and bad reasons. There's perhaps pranks that you played on teachers and things you got away with. Perhaps you remember a little bit about harsh discipline and how you were treated and how others were treated. And perhaps most of all you remember all that rote learning, all the tests, having to learn copious amounts of material. Is that the way things are in schools today? Clinton, tell us a little bit about school life today. Is it like that or is it different?
Well, I think it's quite different. I think that teachers today are more relational. I think that they get in a bit more with the children, get to know them more. So they're not just, I suppose, just a teacher, just teaching. They're actually interacting with the students more, and I think that's an important thing. I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. Josh, you're fresh in the field. Is it like this or is it something different to what you expected?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit different being on this end of the spectrum. I'm really enjoying teaching, and one of the things that I find is that while there are elements of similarity, it's amazing how quickly things are changing.
Lyndon, you've been around education for some time. I perceive that the perception of teachers is somewhat changed over time. My father was a state school principal, and he was held in great esteem in the communities that he worked, particularly country communities. Kind of sense that maybe teachers in many places aren't held in such high esteem. I know there are parts of the world where they are, but what's your experience in Australia?
Well, I think it comes down to how well a teacher is known. I think if, now in your case, you know your father well and you understood his situation. But if teachers are not well known by the community people, they make their own judgments. And sometimes those judgments are based on what they see as perhaps a little bit of militancy, work to rules. They look at the holidays and say, what a fantastic life, and still they don't appreciate it. So there's all sorts of perceptions that are in some way unreal.
And we have to deal with that, but I would suggest that the majority of teachers are incredibly dedicated, incredibly passionate about what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Josh, tell the audience a little bit about what it's like in a typical day for a teacher.
Wow, well, I think to start with, I'd just say there's no such thing as a typical day for a teacher. Every day is different, and that's what I think we would all agree makes our job amazing. But I guess some common elements that you would find every day. Arrive at school, you might go through the office, you probably have a staff meeting in the morning, after which you might quickly photocopy something that you forgot the day before, or you know, duck off to roll call, which is a great time to sort of for me anyway, to get to just see my roll call class in the morning, and then depending on the amount of periods you're teaching in the day, if it's a 6-period day, for me, I know I might not get a break all day, you know, Well,
No lunch.
No lunch, off to sports straight away in the afternoon if it's a Wednesday, which is great. I love it. And it's sort of part of what just makes your day go so quick. You sort of get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, I just got here. And then you realise, oh no, I do feel pretty tired.
But then when you do get to the end of the day, it's not really the end of the day, because now in Josh's case, is so much marking to do. I imagine you take much of that home too,
Yeah,
Josh.
as an English teacher, you take quite a bit home, especially at certain times during the year. But I know, but for every teacher, there's a lot of prep work and a lot of stuff that goes on at home after school.
So would we go as far as saying that during the school term it's a 24/7 sort of role?
Yeah, absolutely. When I think of my job, it's more of a way of life in some ways. You know, if I'm reading a paper or if I'm reading an internet article on the weekend, I'll be constantly thinking, oh, that'd be good for this class, or maybe I could incorporate that concept here. And everything I'm interacting with in my daily life, I'm relating to my job at school. So
you live school.
yeah.
A teaching principal. Do you live school, Clinton?
Oh, I don't just live it, I eat and drink school. It's everything really. Yeah, no, I suppose I get up in the morning and get to school around 7:30 every day. Start thinking about worships. We have teachers all coming together at the beginning of the day for worship. Yeah, lots of things to do. First thing that I do when I get into the office is I check through 20, 30 emails every single day. Yeah, a lot of them are probably not really applicable, but yeah, you still got to sort through all of those. And then you're planning for the day, getting the last minute touches happening. Then you get through worship, have that experience, set the tone for the day. And as the principal, I sort of go through what we're all going to be doing for the day in terms of the teachers. I then go into the classroom, teach, then come back out and, during recess, lunch, have to meet people coming in, interviews, all the rest of it. So it's sort of like Josh, I don't really get lunch or recess, so to speak. Quite often I go home and it's pretty amazing that, I'm hungry and I think, oh, why am I hungry? Oh, that's right, I didn't eat.
Yeah.
I just literally forget, I'm so busy.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't sort of stop at 3 o'clock. We have after school sports and have to be out there on duties and organising all of that. And then we have, meetings, board meetings, school board meetings, all of that type of thing. So, yeah.
Amazing. The life of a teacher, the life of a principal is very, very complex. And when we come back from the break, we'll be looking at some of the other complexities. All lines of work have required a high degree of accountability in the world today. One wondering what's happening in the teaching fraternity. We'll come back after a break. Welcome back to Smart from the Start. We've been asking questions about what is school all about today, and asking questions that perhaps you're afraid to ask. What do teachers do day by day? What's happening in the area of accountability in schools? Leanne, give us a few insights.
I think accountability is a good thing, but I think it's exploded. I think there's just so many things that we're having to do. When I worked in England, initiative after initiative being rolled out by the government, and we just have to pick up the slack. And there's no more time to do what you need to do. But you just have to get on the train and keep going. There's loads to do.
I've heard teachers say that they're not keen to continue in teaching because all they're doing is paperwork, and what they really went into teaching for was to teach.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's definitely a big tension between the paperwork that you need to do and the day-to-day stuff, which we all started with because that's what we love the most. So your day, you have your 9 to 3 day, which is the face-to-face contact, but the hours outside of that are enormous.
What do the rest of our panellists think about this area of accountability?
Yeah, I would agree with Leanne in saying that it has really risen. I know from the perspective of a new scheme teacher, there is a certain protocol which we have to go through just to prove that we're meeting outcomes as we go through our course, that yes, we are liaising with parents, and I have evidence of this here, and we're having to compile this entire body of work separate from our teaching, and although it's part of it and we're more just documenting what we're doing, it's all part of that. This is another administrative task we have on top of our teaching load. So yeah, it's there.
Lyndon, you've been in teaching for quite some time. Have you seen any changes?
Well, absolutely, particularly in the area of reporting to parents. The government is now stipulating just how that reporting will be done, what words are used, what principles are applied, and so on. So there's fine standards to keep in regard to that.
Clinton?
I was just about to say before that even to go on an excursion nowadays, you've pretty much got to fill out 3 or 4 pieces of paper just to document everything that's happening.
And I guess that leads on to another aspect of schooling which creates some challenges. I know a lot of principals who no longer will take young people out on any form of excursion or school trip. They've just banned it at their school because of legal responsibilities. Lyndon, this is an area that has certainly grown in education.
It's certainly changed. I remember in the good old days when I was in school, we never went on excursions. Now, I'm sure it was a different reason for what you're alluding to, but occupational health and safety is a critical factor in our program today. Probably the main duty of care responsibility that comes on a teacher is simply that. You as a teacher are the parent in the absence of the parent in the school setting, and everything you do is judged according to your capacity as parent, seen as parent to that child. And if you go off campus, as Clinton has said, the risks are even greater.
And even within the school context, you have to be very careful in terms of your demeanour, your behaviour, your relationships with young people. Because there's all sorts of innuendo that can develop as a consequence, and you have to be guarded at all times in that regard. One of the areas that quite often people comment on is discipline. Schools have gone soft. They no longer really get in there and catch up with the kids and really let them know that they aren't towing the line. What's actually happening in schools in this day and age in terms of behaviour management, Leanne?
I don't think schools have gone soft. I think our children and our world has changed, and we definitely have a group of children now that will not just take a teacher's word because the teacher said it. So once upon a time the teacher said it, the child did it. Well, that doesn't work anymore. As a teacher, I need to earn their respect. And part of my job is they are very rights driven, they know all their rights, and part of my job is to teach them their responsibilities as well. So the nature of it has changed. You can get such extreme behaviours, it's quite full on sometimes.
Daryl, many of our students come from homes that are troubled these days as well. And so the role of the teacher is to respond to that child's needs, to understand what's happened between the child getting out of bed in the morning and arriving at school at 9 is a really tough thing to do. Where you've got 25 children in your class and somebody's come in under the weather, you've got to try and understand that and respond to it and work with it. That's hard going.
It is. Would you say that the approach to behaviour management is more relational, earning respect rather than just a given? Josh?
I would agree. I would think that today a lot of teachers relate to their students a lot more, not just in the classroom but also out of the classroom as well, whether it be on some sort of Stormco project, which is an initiative of the Adventist, a service activity run by the Adventist Church, where we take students away for a period of time to help a community in need, and interacting with a student on that sort of level outside of the classroom does amazing things. When you come back to school, all of a sudden if you say something to that student, they will respect you, and more likely than not, they are more likely to, listen to you, take it on board.
So passionate teachers win the respect. Perhaps if they're not so passionate, it doesn't come so naturally.
It does seem to work that way,
Another question. Quite often people say, back to basics, get back to the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. Schools have lost the plot. They're doing all this stuff. They're just entertaining kids non-stop all day long. They've got away from the basics. How do you respond to that, Clinton?
Well, that's an assumption that schools have gone away from the basics. I don't believe that they have. There's probably even more emphasis on numeracy and literacy and the rest nowadays. I think though that there's new, what we call new literacies coming in, you know, social literacy, IT literacy, computers. There's growing, ever-growing basics that are coming in now for a new world. Yeah.
I would agree with Quinton in just saying that I think the same skills are there, but we're applying them in different ways. And so they don't seem like they're what they used to be. It can look like they're no longer there. However, just because you're writing, it might be you're writing content for a web page rather than an essay, but you're still using those skills in a modern context.
In history, IQ was the big issue that schools dealt with. These days, EQ, or emotional intelligence, is really seen as far more critical, and we're dealing with that side of it. So that's expanding the basics.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks, panel. I think you have stood up to the test extremely well. You've handled some really tough questions. Thank you. When we come back for the break, we're going to be looking at the profession of teaching itself. What are the stress levels associated with it, and how are teachers coping in this environment? Welcome back to Smart from the Start. We've been looking at all the questions you want to know about schools and education, and our panel of experts have handled those questions very well. Thank you, panel. You know, teaching is a demanding profession. In fact, it is a stressful profession, and when statistics are looked at, it is considered to be perhaps the second most stressful profession after air traffic controllers. This is an amazing statistic. I would suggest that an air traffic controller can actually go home at night and perhaps have a relax. I'm not sure if all teachers do that, particularly during the school term. So a stressful, demanding career. Leanne, do you resonate with that?
Yeah, I think there's a high level of demand. Whether you read that as stress or not, I think depends on personality. But the demands are huge. The emotional responsibility, you know, I need to be calm, patient, kind. Whether I have a late night or not impacts on how I will relate to my children the next day. So it has ramifications for my life. From a spiritual perspective, you know, I walk into the class and I think, you know, the way I interact with these children now potentially has implications for eternity. And I think that awesome responsibility is huge, and you don't walk away from that. That's with you at 8 o'clock at night when you're lying awake thinking, oh, what about this, what about that? That stays with you most definitely. I think it's an awesome responsibility.
Stepping into the role, Josh, have you found it emotionally draining? It's coming to the end of the day?
Yeah, I think there's so many stakeholders in a school that you have to be so many people, you have to relate to so many people on so many different levels that it can be really taxing. You've got to relate to your colleagues, then you have to relate to parents, you also have to relate to your students. You know, you're a teacher, you're a mentor, you're a coach, you're all these things to all these people, and it can be so draining. I find that teaching, it just goes so quickly. The day at school flies because you get there and you're just mentally engaged from, you know, the moment the bell goes to the moment the bell goes at the end of the day. It's just totally engaged, and so it's a great thing. You're never watching the clock. It's not a watch the clock job.
One of the things about teaching, people often say, is you're making hundreds of small decisions quickly, all the time. As a new principal, how have you found that, Clinton?
Well, to be honest, it's draining. There's some days that I've gone home and, you know, it's 6 o'clock. I've been sitting in the lounge and just dropped off to sleep. Must be getting old or something. Yeah, but it's balanced by, it's a great job. I'd encourage anyone anyone who's thinking about it.
I think it can be typified for me. I just am thinking back to an instance that happened a week or two ago in a grade 9 class where the bell went at the end of the period and this one girl said, "Is that it? Is the class over? Oh, I thought we just got here." And it really does feel like that sometimes when you're engaged in what's going on. It's Like, it's just an amazing thing.
Yeah, I think the stress levels can be high, but the job satisfaction can be fantastic. And that's what keeps you at it, because you love what you do.
You can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hopefully we've convinced our audience that teachers earn their holidays. I certainly think they do. There's no question about that. You know, the attrition rate from teaching is something that is quite a challenge in Australia, I know elsewhere as well. We've got a lot of younger teachers who are saying, wow, this is too hard. You know, I didn't expect it was going to be this much work. And when you couple that with a growing number of baby boomers who are now starting to retire from the education sector, there's going to be, I think, some real challenges in communities to be able to find quality teachers. You know, you've been in it just a few years, you're now a principal of a school, Clinton. How do you feel about this area of people leaving teachers because it's just all too hard?
I think it's a bit sad in a way because, yeah, like we've said, there's a lot of stress and a lot of strain, but it's definitely well worth it. I just think being a new administrator, there's a lot of challenges out there, and I think that a lot of the younger teachers who might be called to become an administrator look at it and say, well, you know, that's not for me, I don't want to do that. But I'd encourage them that if you are called to do something like that, then give it a go, because the job satisfaction makes it all worthwhile, and you are making a difference.
Daryl, the hint in a school about how you're dealing with this is looking at the average age of your teachers. I know we're becoming much smarter about this. I think in a typical school, if your average age is about 40 and you've got a representative group across all of the age groups, you're in pretty good shape. If it's higher than that, you've got some serious issues to look out for.
Well, I think in Australia at the moment, the average age of teachers is 50, and that is a concern. So, Josh, what do we do to keep great young teachers like you? How do we value you and make you stay?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think sometimes, and a lot of teachers say this, is that it can be a lonely profession. Often it's you and the students all day in that classroom, and you don't get that colleague environment that you get in so many other jobs. I think really establishing a sense of community within your school so that teachers feel like they're valued, they're recognised, and they feel like they have time to relate to their colleagues during work hours in some way perhaps. But yeah, I think passionate people will stick with it, but school dynamic is so important to have the more experienced teachers to not only mentor new teachers like myself, but just to be really good role models for students as well. I know as a student I looked up to a lot of my older teachers too, not just the younger ones.
You know, being a teacher or administrator within a Christian context creates another level of demand, another level of involvement, and a lot of that is good, but a lot of it is challenging as we're trying to keep young people engaged with Christianity. How do you relate to that? And what are some of the challenges you're finding in that regard?
Well, sometimes the gratification levels that you look for in a job aren't immediately available in teaching. Now, you might find that you're waiting 10 or 20 years before somebody comes back and says, hey, remember what we used to do? I love that. So waiting a long time is one of the concerns.
So you need to hang around, Josh. You were going to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there can be a wait, an extended period of time. I also think that there's moment by moment joys in the classroom where it's just amazing moments. For me, I just treasure and love that moment where you're explaining a concept to a child and they just go, oh, I get it now, and just that aha moment. It just is priceless. It's what you do your job for.
Indeed. You know, I feel that there's probably a lot of ways that the community can be engaged with schools. Quite often the concept was leave them at the gate and kiss them goodbye. How do you feel about that? What are you wanting to do in terms of community interaction? What are you thinking there?
I think a partnership between the community, whether it's family, extended community and school, is invaluable. We can't do everything, and I think there's so many great resources out there that we can tap into, that if we work together we complement each other.
Excellent, excellent. I think that sums it up very well. Folks, we hope that you have enjoyed exploring with us questions about school that you've never asked and wanted to ask, and we also hope that you will engage in your school community and make a contribution.